Okay, hi guys, I'm back. In my last video, I gave you a little bit of an introduction to myself, my philosophy, and why I am choosing to put videos on YouTube. Um, and I told you that I have decided for some crazy reason that it's a good idea to share my story with you, but in a very in-depth way, and actually go in and read my journals to you that I have been keeping over the course of this journey that I'm on. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna do that, and we're gonna see how it goes. But so I started with a little bit of an introduction on the last video, but I'll rehash that real quickly. 2010, December 2010, I graduated from college um, with a useless degree. And then I went directly into midwifery school and did that for a full year, so all of 2011. And then I quit that. And so I spent the first part of 2012 um, being really lost and confused, but also starting to awaken to the reality of the world that I was living in. And then it was September 2012 that I moved to Colorado, making this huge sweeping change in my life. And I got all wrapped up in this relationship. I mean, when I first got there, I was all wrapped up in just trying to survive. The limited amount of money that I had saved up did not last as long as I thought that it would. I mean, I went out there without a job. And so, yeah, the funds quickly dwindled. So the first part, like right after I got out there, was just about trying to survive. But within about a month, I met this guy, and it was like a month or two later. I can't remember. No, I moved out there September 9th, and I met him. It was it was like the day before Halloween, I think. It's right at the end of October. So then I was with him that whole time for like 2.5 years, and I didn't really journal at all. During that time, I was just completely wrapped up in the relationship and what we were doing in our lives, and but there was a journal entry that I made. I mean, I had been journaling in and out throughout my, like, on and off throughout my life. But it was few and far between. I never really kept up with it. It was something that I always kind of wanted to do on a regular basis. And I would like start a journal and write like two or three entries, and then I wouldn't write for like a couple years. So that was kind of what happened here. It was like I had been in Colorado for 2 years almost before I wrote a journal entry. And the reason I wrote this one, it was July 18th, 2014, was because my estranged father, I say estranged because I was, 28 at that time of this entry in 2014, and I hadn't seen him since I was my dad since I was 16. Um, and I'm not going to go real deep into that because I know that I do later. So, but anyway, so there was this significant event in 2014 that I ended up writing about, um, where my dad, somehow I got back in touch with my stepmom and found out that her and my dad were going to be in Colorado, real close to where I was living at the time. So we decided to meet up while they were there. At first, when I agreed to meet up with my stepmom, I didn't know that my dad was going to be coming too. So I agreed to meet up with her. And then later I found out that my dad was going to be there too. So I got really nervous because I hadn't seen my dad since I was 16. Oh, except for, I'm sorry, I did go to my half sister's wedding a few years prior, um, for just a couple days, and that was really awkward. Anyway, so my dad, who I never talked to, he's going to be showing up, and I, in my mind, was thinking that there was no, um, that this was probably the last chance that I had, um, to have a real conversation with him because I didn't foresee us being in contact, anytime in the future, the way that things were going. And, um, so I made up my mind that I was going to have this particular conversation with my dad, when I saw him, when he was coming to Colorado. I had been daydreaming about this conversation, my whole like teenage and adult life, um, because my dad was, so my mom and dad were never married, and I visited my dad during the summers when I was a kid and like Christmases and stuff. Um, right after we started going to visit him, he became abusive physically, emotionally, psychologically, um, and mostly to I have a twin brother. Um, but I was on the receiving end of some of it, but my brother got the worst part. So that caused a lot of stuff for me. And that was part of the reason that I didn't see him after the age of 16 was because I moved away, from where they lived, and I chose to not be a part of their life or that side of the family because there was just too much pain for me. I just couldn't do it. So I had been daydreaming about this conversation that I wanted to have with my dad because that side of the family, my dad and my stepmom, they claimed that they had no idea why I, kind of exited their life, back when I was a teenager. They claimed that they had no idea and tried to make it out to be about silly, superficial things. And I needed them, like when I went back to visit for, my sister's wedding. I said it was so awkward because everybody kept saying, like, people that I hadn't seen in, over 10 years or whatever kept saying, like, oh, how come we never see you around? And like, you should come visit more and stuff like that. And it just like so many people were saying that, and like more distant relatives and friends and stuff that I just like it was it drove me crazy. Like I just couldn't stand the pretenses and the pretending like nobody knew what had happened when we were kids. Um, so when I found out that my dad was going to be visiting, I was like, this is going to be my last chance to have this real conversation with him, to tell him exactly why I hadn't been around, to tell him exactly how his behaviors when I was a kid had hurt me. I wanted him to know the truth so that I wanted him to hear me say it so that he couldn't deny anymore, so that he couldn't pretend like he didn't know what was going on. So I was stressing about this visit from my dad. In this little journal entry, I'm talking about the fact that I'm stressing about it. And then a friend of mine, Chris, made a suggestion that I should write a letter to my dad, not with the intention of sending it to him, but just write it down to like help me process my feelings and get it out. Like all the things that I was mad at him about and all the things that I like really wanted to say to him. So, in this journal entry, I write out a letter to my dad. I'm just summarizing stuff here because I don't really feel the need to go into it, but I did think it was important to note this entry because it was quite a significant event. This meeting with my dad. So after this entry, I write out this pretend letter. And also, I include, so several years ago while I was still in college, I was like rummaging through my mom's file system, looking for some paperwork that I needed that she had, and I came across this document, this handwritten document that my mom had written when we were kids, that was saying all that was like documenting all the abuse that we were telling her about. So I had come across that and had written it all down for myself so that I would have it. I don't know why I wanted to do that at the time. It was, words from when I was a kid, what we had told my mom that my dad had been doing. So it was a very difficult item to come across initially, but so I had it. I had made a copy of it. So I decided, that I was so nervous thinking about talking to my dad that like, and I knew myself, like I know when I get into these like scary conversations, that like my mind goes blank and I didn't want that to happen. So I like took this, like I wrote down this document, of what we had said when we were kids. And when I, when I did end up meeting with my dad in July 2014, I came armed with this paper written out of all these things that he had done to us when we were kids. And I'll just add that that because of this document, because of these things that we had told my mom, she ended up taking him to court, and it ended up to where my brother didn't have to go. My brother didn't have to go visit anymore because, in addition to the things that we had said, one summer when we came home, my brother was covered in bruises, and my mom took photos of those. So, those photos, along with the stuff that we had said, she took to court, and it ended up that my brother didn't have to visit anymore, but I did. So anyway, so I meet up with my dad. Um, and I tell him the things that I want to tell him, all the reasons that I've been so angry with him, um, the reasons that I never came around anymore. Um, I said word for word the things that were on this document that he had done. Like I said to him, you did this and this and this. And I'm sure it was really hard for him to hear. It was hard for me to say. I was like shaking the whole time. Um, but I did it. And that was kind of a pivotal moment for me, to actually say out loud, to actually stand up to him. And it didn't go well, of course. I knew that it probably wouldn't. What ended up happening was that he um, went and told my stepmom and my half siblings um, that I had said certain things that I hadn't said, and just kind of painted it out like I was being really cruel to him in that conversation. Um, and I got a shit ton of backlash from that side of the family. I really hadn't been in contact with them, but I started getting messages and stuff from them, um, saying how horrible I was, and saying how great of a father our dad was. And it was, that was rough. But for me, it was, I didn't really care that I was being ostracized still again by, or, scapegoated by that side of the family. I didn't really care because for me, it was such a breakthrough to have stood up to my dad and to have said out loud, to have said the truth, because that side of the family they don't talk about any of it. They pretend like nothing happened. And I was kind of the black sheep because I wasn't okay with that. Like I wasn't okay with just pretending like nothing happened. And, throughout my teenage years, that it got so bad trying to pretend like nothing happened and that everything was okay, that I couldn't be around. I couldn't be around anymore. It was like killing me. Um, In fact, when I left when I was 16, I left because my mom was getting a divorce from the guy that she had married while we were there. And so she wanted to leave to go be near her family, who lived in another state. And so it came down to staying um, there in that area where my dad lived, or leaving and moving with my mom. Now, my whole childhood, I lived with my mom and just visited my dad, like on occasion. So, but at that time, during our teenage years, we were living close by to my dad. So, but my mom was getting divorced. She was leaving, and I decided to go with her. Um, and I got a huge amount of backlash from my dad's side of the family for that. Um, for them, it was always like a competition, a game. Like, you know, they thought I was choosing sides. It was very immature. They couldn't understand that, like, you know, I couldn't leave my mom alone. She's going through a divorce. Like, she's the one who had taken care of me my whole life, the one who had loved me. I couldn't abandon her. But also, I couldn't stay. I knew, and I was 16 years old, I knew that if I stayed and moved in with my dad and lived with him permanently, um, I knew that it would change me in some very fundamental ways because I was already seeing how um, his influence and that side of the family's influence on me was damaging me. I could already see the damage that was being done to my sense of self, and I knew that it would be irreparable if I stayed. I knew that I would lose myself. That's that's how it felt in my mind, that I would lose myself. Um, and so I left. So that's the backstory on some of that. And then, yeah, so I had that encounter with my dad. They basically disowned me in all but the legal letter after that. So that was July 2014. And then I don't write again until October 2014. And I'm not going to read this one either, just because it's just kind of short, and I don't think it would make a whole lot of sense without me explaining things. So, October 2014, I write again after having had a break, that I write about the fact that after the last fight that my boyfriend Alan and I had, that things had gotten so bad that I was now seeking out a psychologist for help, because it was just, the relationship with Alan was getting to be too much. And so this entry is just me kind of talking through, like, my reasoning for wanting to go to see a psychologist. And then in November, I've got another entry talking about that relationship and how things were getting so bad. I kind of feel like I should go into a little bit of backstory. I mentioned a little bit, but there were some patterns that were playing out in this relationship that were quite similar to my dad's personality. My dad was quite manipulative, and I started seeing some of this coming out in there. I started seeing some of this come out in my relationship with Alan. And it was so confusing to me. I didn't. There, go lay down. God damn it. Sorry. My dog it's nighttime and he's barking at something. So I was starting like this relationship had been going very poorly. I mean, I we had been together for like 2 years at this point, and things had been going very badly, but I didn't really understand what was going on. I just knew that something was very, very wrong, and like I was starting to feel crazy. He was trying to make me feel crazy. uh, and it started out just like emotional stuff. He would say that he really liked the way that my mind worked until I had something like bad to say about him. Then he didn't like it at all. Um, but towards the end, it started shifting from just like emotional stuff to he started getting physical with me, and that's when I knew that something was very, very wrong. Uh, and it started out kind of innocent, like it was like this manipulation thing coming in where we would be having a very bad argument. I would be getting very triggered, and would want to get away. It was just getting too heated. And so I would try to remove myself from the argument, to like take a break, take a breather. And he wouldn't let me leave. It started out, he would just like follow me. Like wherever I went, he would just follow me. I would lock myself in the bathroom. He would pick the lock. Um, he wouldn't let me get away. And so like I was like so triggered, and it it felt very threatening because I couldn't get away to like let myself calm down. But it escalated from him just following me to he would try to like grab a hold of me. And he would say that he was trying to give me a hug. Like he would do this thing where he would say, "I just want to love you," and like he would hold his arms out like he was trying to hug me. Um, but I would say like, "Don't touch me, don't touch me," and he wouldn't listen. And so he would put his hands on me and grab a hold of me, and I would try to fight him off because I was so terrified and like worked up, and just really felt unsafe and was like really triggered. Um, so I would try to fight him off when he would put his hands on me, and but he wouldn't like let go, and so we would end up like wrestling to the floor. Um, and so the first time that that happened, um, I like freaked out. I went and stayed. I went and stayed at my employer's guest house. I was a nanny at the time, and I called in to work, like crying hysterically, and saying what had happened. That essentially Alan and I had like gotten into a wrestling match, like because he wouldn't let me go. um, and so my employer let me stay at his house for like a week, in his guest house, um, because I told him that I didn't feel safe at my home anymore. And so I stayed away for like a week, and finally had like calmed down enough to talk to Alan, and we met up and went for a walk and talked. And he was very contrite, um, and made all kinds of promises that things would change and he would spend the rest of his life trying to make it up to me and blah blah blah. And it it happened again. I was just looking through this journal. So I think that happened when I stayed away. I think that happened in November 2014. And then I came back and things were kind of good for a little bit. We kind of went back to normal life, Alan and I. But we were still fighting a lot. We ended up getting a puppy, right? Like that would solve our problems, right? And so maybe I'll start here. Monday, March 23rd, 2015. Well, of course it's happened again. And of course, this is when I choose to write. Always negative, right? But it didn't just happen again. It's happened multiple times. And each time it has escalated in intensity. Before I get into all of that, I think I should at least summarize and wrap up the last major event that I wrote about so that I can get a bigger picture view of what is going on. The goal of all of this is to try to figure it out, right? Not just bitch about my problems. That last entry was from over 4 months ago, so I'm just going on spotty memory here. But from what I remember, it continued on like that well into the night. This was, about us fighting and him following me around. And I already just told you about kind of what was going on there, so I don't need to read that. Like I said, it's happened since and it's only gotten worse. I couldn't honestly even tell you how many times it's happened since then until this last big blow up that occurred a couple of weeks ago. My memory is so faulty. We had gone to visit my family for Christmas and had a huge fight there. His family was here for Thanksgiving. A lot has occurred in the meantime. We got a puppy, Bear, and I adore him, but it has added extra pressure on a very unhealthy relationship. The last major blowup occurred several weeks ago, the day before we were to leave on our steamboat trip. We had a trip planned with all our friends to go snowboarding in steamboat. It was a Tuesday night. We were taking the dogs for a walk. Alan criticized the way I was walking Bear on the leash, exaggerating how much lead I was giving him and how harsh my corrections were. I disagreed with what he was saying. He called me negative and said that I was ruining the evening, etc., etc. I don't even remember what went on for the rest of the evening, but I do recall significant events from the next morning. I woke up to Alan calling me a bitch, to the dogs, to my brand new puppy. He started singing to them what a bitch I am. Of course, this really upset me. How could I dream of having children with this person if he's going to badmouth me and call me names to our dogs? Chaos ensued with him following me around and me trying to flee. I told him repeatedly to leave me alone, and he didn't. There was a point in his following me and invading my space where I was pushing him away from me. Then there was a point when I was punching him in the chest and arms to get him away from me. At one point, I was shrinking away from him in the shower, and he turned it on, and there was a scuffle, and the shower head got broken off. There was a point when I got the phone, threatened to call the police, didn't know the number for the police, dialed 911, hit send, and then hung up immediately because I wasn't quite ready to involve the authorities. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think that this occurred, me threatening to call the police occurred after the following incident. But the main event, the one that makes me question everything that this relationship is based on, the one that makes me think that this will never work out, that I will never be able to trust him, was when Alan had me backed into the corner of our closet. our big walk-in closet. I was sobbing, screaming at Alan to leave me alone, trying to shrink as far into the wall as possible, almost hyperventilating. Alan was closing in on me. I tried to push past him, and I got so overwhelmed and felt so threatened. Mind you, I was still screaming at him to leave me alone and to get away from me. But I felt so threatened that I punched him in the face. Now that I'm rehashing this in my mind, I think I even warned him. I think I said something to the effect of, if you don't get away from me, I'm going to hit you. And I think he even responded with something like, yeah, do it. And I did. And instead of taking that moment to get away, he fell down. He fell down on the ground. I think he was exaggerating because I really didn't hit him that hard. More of a half slap, half punch. I've never hit anyone before in my life, and I never dreamed that I ever would. But anyway, instead of taking that moment to get away, I just stood there in shock with all kinds of thoughts running through my head like, oh God, what have I done? I can't take that back. I actually did that. I can't believe I actually did that. I felt incredible guilt immediately. I was sure that that act signified the end, that there was no coming back from what I had just done. Time was all muddled, but somehow we were both up, wrestling, and then he wrestled me to the ground. And then he was on top of me, pinning me down, and I was thrashing and screaming like a banshee, trying to push him off me. And then he bit me on the palm of my hand and latched on, holding me down with his whole body and subduing me with his teeth, just holding on for what seemed like forever. And I felt so completely violated somehow, completely stripped of my power, my freedom to not allow him to touch me. I felt completely defeated with his teeth digging into the palm of my hand. I just gave up. I stopped struggling, and I just laid there. I went numb, mostly emotionally, I guess. But yeah, I just shut down. And after a moment, he got up, got off me, and walked away. I feel like it I feel like it seems overly dramatic for me to say this, but I felt raped. And I told him this at some point later. I think maybe even that morning, a few minutes later before he left for work, that I felt raped, all but the penis penetration. It's just that utter helplessness of being completely forced against my will by another person. Maybe I'm being dramatic. Somebody who had actually been raped would probably agree with that statement, but that's how I felt in that moment, powerless on the floor. After that, I gathered myself up pretty quickly. I needed to escape as fast as possible from that feeling. But I got the phone again and told Alan I was going to call our friend Aaron, that maybe Aaron could talk some sense into him. And I just felt so unsafe. I needed help, and I was too chicken to call the cops, especially though now looking back unreasonably, considering that I had hit him first, punched him in the face. And I called Aaron in hysterics. He didn't hear it at first, thinking Alan was calling from the house phone because I guess the secretary had already told him that Alan was late for work. Alan and Aaron worked together. I don't remember what all I told him, but he was really supportive and said that I should come stay the night after work. And so I went to work, cried on my boss's shoulder again when I got there, but worked and held it together pretty damn well. And then went to Aaron and Heather's when I got off. It was just Chris, that's another friend. It was just Chris and Aaron when I got there. Chris was living with Aaron and Heather at the time. It was just Chris and Aaron when I got there, and I laid it all out, told them everything, and they were just stunned. Now that I'm recalling this, I'm remembering some of the stuff that Alan said to me the night before when we were fighting. At one point, he was screaming at me that I am weak, that I am a weak person. He said that I always make excuses just like my mom and that I'm going to end up just like her. And at some point, he brought up my past, the stuff with my dad, and said that I need to just let it go, that it was the past, that I'm just using that as an excuse. Anyway, I laid it all out to Chris and Aaron, and then again to Heather when she got home. Heather ended up rearranging the steamboat trip so that we now had 2 rooms instead of just one, so that I could still go but not have to be around Alan. And we went, and it was miserable for me. Alan appeared to be just fine, though. Anyway, that happened, and life has moved on since then, not so normally. Um, Alan was just going along like everything was fine pretty much, but I was depressed. We had little fights here and there, me pretty much closed off, Alan not pushing anything too much. So I'm going to skip some of this. There's a few things in here that are a little more personal than I would really like to share, just more intimate. Just kind of rehashing the end of the relationship, essentially. The stuff didn't end. Things were still going on. It kind of died down a little bit, but started creeping back up. Alan left for a little while to go visit family. We had a bunch of fights. I broke up with him over the phone while he was gone. But when he came back, we were still living together. That was like in April. We were still living together, and he was trying to. He was saying that he wanted to make it up to me. He was saying that he was going to make things better, that we could work it out together. And so it was kind of this weird limbo phase where we were broken up and he was going to move out. And so like I was looking for roommates, but we were still kind of like, it was kind of half-hearted. We were still kind of like trying to work on things, and I was thinking, maybe if he moved out for a little while, that we could like, that would be the wake-up call that he needed. And then at one point, his sister and I sat down and talked, and she had worked at a domestic violence shelter, and we were talking, and she said that what I was telling her was the exact same things that she heard from the women at the shelter, that that the person, the abuser, tries to make you feel like you're crazy. And that's exactly what had been going on. I like was questioning my sanity, questioning my reality, questioning my perceptions on what was going on. I really felt like I was going crazy. So that was a big moment. Talking to his sister, I write here at the end of this entry, and it finally clicked for me, all of these things that I had been suspecting but questioning myself on. I finally had the confirmation that I needed by someone that I trust and by someone who knows Alan, that I have not been being irrational like Alan would have me believe, that the things that I've been going on, that the things that have been going on are so not okay and could easily be classified as psychological abuse, that I'm not being overly dramatic as he would have me believe by considering it as such. I feel kind of free, like a huge weight has been lifted, like I've somehow been given permission to believe myself. And maybe that is my gift. That is what I will get from all of this, the ability to finally be able to start trusting myself. So I'm going to end that. I'm going to end that here. That was April 2015. All right, I'll see you guys later.